Imagine being homeless. Living in your car. And the world telling you you'll never make it. This is the story of Paul DeJoria, a man who went from nothing to a billionaire empire. Born in 1944, Paul DeJoria faced a childhood of poverty. He worked odd jobs just to survive, from delivering newspapers to sweeping floors. By the time he was an adult, he found himself homeless, living in his car, trying to figure out a way to make a life for himself. While living in that car, sleeping next to his son, Paul had a realization that would change everything. And this is the moment you need to pay attention to, because this is the fork in the road where winners separate from everyone else. He realized, I'm at the bottom. I have nothing left to lose. That sentence might not sound revolutionary, but think about what it means. When you have nothing to lose, you stop being afraid of failure. When you're already sleeping in your car, what's the worst that can happen? You fail. You're already there, so Paul made a decision. He wasn't going to look for another job. He wasn't going to climb someone else's ladder. He was going to bet on himself. Around this time, he reconnected with an old friend, a hairdresser named Paul Mitchell. Paul had a dream: create a line of professional hair care products that were different from everything else on the market, products that were higher quality, didn't test on animals, and were actually good for your hair. The problem? Paul Mitchell had no money either. Zero business experience. And the hair care industry was already dominated by massive corporations with unlimited resources. But Paul saw something. He saw an opportunity where everyone else saw impossibility. They shook hands on a partnership. They'd start a company together, Paul Mitchell Systems. They needed $700,000 to launch. They had $700. Let me say that again. They needed $700,000. They had $700. 1,000 times less than they needed. Any rational person would have said, this is delusional. Give up. Go get a real job. Paul DeJoria didn't have the luxury of being rational. He had a kid to feed and a fire in his belly, so here's what they did with that $700. They formulated 2 products, shampoo 1 and a conditioner. That's it. 2 products. They made them in Paul's garage. They designed their own labels. They hand-bottled everything, and then came the hard part, selling them. Remember, Paul had been a door-to-door salesman before. He knew rejection intimately. So he went back to what he knew. He'd wake up every morning, put on the most professional outfit he could manage, and go door-to-door to hair salons across Los Angeles. Not stores, salons. He was going directly to hairdressers and salon owners, carrying bottles of shampoo in a bag, giving his pitch: this shampoo is different. It's higher quality. Your clients will love it. It's pH balanced. No harsh chemicals. Just trust me. Do you know what their response was 99% of the time? No. Not interested. We already have a supplier. Get out of my salon. Door after door after door. Rejection after rejection after rejection. Most people quit after 10 rejections. Maybe 20 if they're really determined. Paul DeJoria heard no hundreds of times. Thousands, probably, but here's what separated him from everyone else: he didn't take rejection personally. This is critical. Listen closely. When someone said no to his shampoo, Paul didn't hear "you're a failure." He heard "not yet," or "wrong person," or "I didn't explain it well enough." He treated every rejection as data. What part of his pitch wasn't landing? Was he talking to the wrong salons? Was his timing off? Should he adjust his presentation? He'd go home to that car where his son was waiting, and instead of wallowing, he'd refine his approach for tomorrow, and slowly, painfully slowly, he started getting yeses. One salon would try his products. Then another. Then a stylist would tell another stylist. Word started spreading in the professional hair community: there's this new brand, Paul Mitchell. It's actually really good. But sales were still slow. They were barely surviving. They couldn't afford advertising. They couldn't afford to hire salespeople. It was just Paul, pounding pavement, knocking on doors, hustling for every single sale. Then something shifted. Hairdressers started reordering. That was the signal. When professionals who tried the products once came back for more, John Paul knew he had something real. They weren't just buying decent shampoo. They were buying into a philosophy: premium quality, cruelty-free, professional-grade products that actually worked. Within 2 years, 1982, Paul Mitchell products were in salons across the country, not because of some viral marketing campaign. Not because they got some lucky celebrity endorsement. Because John Paul DeJoria knocked on enough doors, purred no enough times, and refused to quit. By 1989, John Paul Mitchell Systems was doing $100 million in annual revenue. Let me put that in perspective. 9 years earlier, John Paul was sleeping in his car. 9 years later, he'd built a 9-figure business. But here's where the story gets even more insane. John Paul didn't stop. While building Paul Mitchell, he'd been paying attention to another industry: spirits. Specifically, tequila. He noticed that in the U.S., tequila had a reputation as cheap, low-quality alcohol, the stuff you did shots with in college and regretted the next morning. But in Mexico, premium tequila was sophisticated, refined, sipped slowly like fine whiskey. So John Paul thought, what if we brought real, premium tequila to the American market? In 1989, he co-founded Patrón Spirits Company, and once again, everyone told him he was crazy. Americans don't want expensive tequila. You're going to fail. John Paul had heard that before. It didn't scare him anymore. He applied the exact same principles: premium quality, attention to detail, grassroots marketing, and relentless hustle. Patrón became the fastest-growing spirits brand in America. By 2018, when he sold his stake, Patrón was valued at over $5 billion. So what does this mean for you? Maybe you're not homeless. Maybe you're not sleeping in your car. But maybe you're stuck. Maybe you're working a job you hate, dreaming about something bigger but terrified to take the leap. Maybe you've tried before and failed, and you're wondering if you should try again. Here's what John Paul DeJoria's story teaches us. Your current situation is not your final destination. The guy sleeping in his car with his son wasn't destined to stay there. But he also didn't magically escape it. He made a decision, a terrifying, illogical, all-in decision, to bet on himself when he had every reason not to. You already have everything you need to start. John Paul had $700 and a dream. You probably have more than that. You have the internet. You have access to information. You have time. The only question is, are you willing to use it? Rejection is not failure. Quitting is. If John Paul had quit after the 100th door slam, we wouldn't know his name. If he'd given up after the 500th rejection, Paul Mitchell wouldn't exist. The only way you truly fail is if you stop trying. Success doesn't require perfection. It requires persistence. John Paul's first products weren't revolutionary. His first pitch wasn't perfect. But he kept going. He kept improving. He kept showing up. That's the secret. It's not sexy. It's not a hack. It's just relentless, stubborn, unglamorous persistence. John Paul DeJoria didn't win because he was special. He won because he refused to stay down. He took a situation that should have destroyed him, homelessness, single parenthood, zero resources, and turned it into the foundation of a billion-dollar empire, not through luck. Not through connections. Through sheer, unbreakable will. So here is my challenge to you. What's your excuse? What's the story you're telling yourself about why you can't start? Why you can't build? Why you can't succeed? Because I guarantee John Paul DeJoria's obstacles were bigger than yours. And he still found a way. The question is, will you? If the story lit a fire in you, hit that subscribe button because we're diving deep into the mindsets, strategies, and stories of people who refuse to accept average. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's stuck, scared, or on the verge of quitting, send them this video. Because sometimes all it takes is one story to change everything. John Paul DeJoria started with nothing. What's stopping you?